Hi, my name is Summer. I'm 950 pounds of pure good looks. I am half Arab, half quarter horse, and Palomino. For about the past 12 years, I have enjoyed participating in competitive endurance rides, teaching people to ride, and helping special kids as a therapeutic horse for kids with disabilities, as well as having fun on trail rides. My owners, Peggy, Emily, and Mark, have always taken very good care of me. In return, I take care of them, especially Mark. Because of his disabilities, I have to make sure that he is safe. Not so long ago, I didn't have much energy, and I didn't feel good. I didn't enjoy my job as a therapy horse. I didn't even want to come out of my paddock. This is my story.
So Peggy, one day Summer wasn't doing well. What happened?
The horse that she had lived with for 7, 8 years became very ill. Well, actually not ill, he had actually gone down, and we knew he had the hind end issue, and it had just gotten, each time he'd gone down, it was harder and harder for it to get up, and so it came a day when we just could not get him back up, and we had to make a decision. Being 37 and knowing that this was going to be a chronic issue, it was a relatively nice day instead of me coming out on a day having the same issue and it's raining and it's pouring and we can't get the vet out here to put him down. So we, between myself, my husband, and the vet, we made a decision to put him down that day, and she was on the other side of the fence. And at that point, I knew when we had been doing our endurance training rides that there was something off, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. We couldn't tell if it was metabolically, if it was a food issue. I'd been working with a feed specialist at the feed store that I get all my products from, and we were working on different things, supplementing her with, and things were helping, but it wasn't helping the hind end, and she was still not sweating appropriately, which was a concern when we do rides because they can overheat and they can tie up really bad. The day after, well, 2 days after we put John down, when I pulled her out, I knew she seemed extremely lethargic, and when I went to pet her, she was extremely hot. So we went to take her temperature, and it was like 106. So I called the vet right away, and he's like, oh, this is not good. So we let it go for a couple days, hoping that she had some kind of a virus. They gave her some antibiotics. All we could do is give her cold ice baths and keep her as comfortable as we could. She was still eating, not tremendously well, but she was eating. And finally on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, I just said, okay, Corey and I were talking, and I said, well, he couldn't get out here. He'd done a blood test. Things didn't look good on the blood test. And so a couple days later, she was leaving looking worse. And I said, my gut is I got to take her to Davis. So I ran her up to Davis. It was 104 out that day, so we couldn't leave right away. Marilyn went with me. We left after we had packed the trailer, and we packed an overnight bag because we weren't sure how long we were going to be at Davis. And we went up like after 6 o'clock, so it was cooler because I didn't want her to be any hotter than she was. So we threw her in the trailer. I didn't even know if we were going to make it up there because she just seemed that off. And so we got up there. It was like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It was dark. The vet came out, took a blood test, and he looked at me and he says, I don't know why this horse is standing because the amount of red blood cells in her system that are functioning are not just below normal, they're abnormally low. And so they admitted her to the isolation wing because they weren't sure if it was some kind of a virus that was transmittable to everybody else. So they put her in a special stall. They did, and then they drew more blood, and then they did an ultrasound. And when they were doing the ultrasound, they were noticing that her spleen was abnormally smaller, and that there looked like there were 2 spots on her spleen that they were concerned about that might be cancerous. And at that point, they were hopeful, but they weren't promising me much. So the next day, after doing some blood tests, she did respond to the extra blood red cells that they had thrown her, and it went up to about 12, but they said they wouldn't send her home till it was stabilized at about 15, 16, 17. So he said at that point, he said, you might as well just go home, because all we can do is just keep doing this all week. And she did really well the next day, and the percentage of red blood cells went up again, and then that night they took a nosedive. And they were really concerned at that point that she might have leukemia. And then the next day when they went to transfuse her again, and he did some more testing, everything rocketed way back up again. And he said, I don't know what's going on here, but he said, let's give her till Sunday, and if she's stabilized at this percentage, then we'll send her home. And he said, I don't know what you're sending her home, this is like bed rest, and we didn't know how long. So Leslie, I had my son and me on EnerPrime, and Leslie had been asking me, well, why don't you put her on EnerPrime? And I was like, him and on. And finally she's like, what do you have to lose? And I'm like, well, I have nothing to lose but my horse, So we started her, I think on a Monday or a Tuesday. I had some, and she said she'd donate a bottle. And I wasn't worried about that much, other than that she was just trying to get me to do it. And so we put her on it, and the next day her feet turned pumpkin orange. I mean, immediately pumpkin orange. And I called Leslie and said, oh my gosh, what's going on? Her feet are orange. So we did some research, and we found out that when horses detox, it comes out in their feet like we do. And that's the color it turns. It's the impurities in the body. So we just kept pumping her, and her energy within a week started getting better. So I went down to the feed store, told the nutritionist that I was working with down there what I had put her on, and he said, well, so we contacted Davis, and I said, well, it hurt to put her on red cell, which is for the blood. And after talking to him and the vet we were using at Davis, we're like, we have nothing to lose. Let's put her on to help just give her another boost. So between it and the EnerPrime, 90 days later, we took another reading, and the blood work was better, but it wasn't off the charts. But what's key is that even at 90 days, the whole new set of red blood cells are not in the system. It takes 120 days. 120 days is key to really have a true reading. Anything else before that, you're getting the last bit of the old stuff coming through. So the test the readings aren't true. Mm-hmm. So at 120 days, it was a week later after 120 days. So it ended up being about 130 days. We took her back up to Davis because they wanted to wait that 120 days to get a good reading. They wanted to retest her for the blood, and then they wanted to redo the ultrasound, because now they wanted to go back and see what they were seeing in the spleen, if it really was the problem, was in the spleen. And immediately they took the blood test again, and before they even had started the ultrasound, the vet looked at me and said, what have you been doing with your horse? I said, well, I told you, I put her on EnerPrime and I did the red blood cell. He says, because not only is her blood test normal, but they're way exceeding that. He said, we're talking about a horse 120 days ago was almost dead, who's now on this end. He was ecstatic. He said, this is amazing. All our other horses are EnerPrime, and especially we had a pony that came in last July, who, after she was here a month, we knew there was a chance she was pregnant, and we knew she was pregnant. And I'm like, well, if it does that well for her, it's like, I have to give that mother it so that the baby is healthier. And she's a very healthy little filly. But we have all the horses on, and I've got 2 geldings that I know it's helping with their urinary tracts, because they have a hard time sometimes peeing when they need to. So most of the horses are on every other day, but the mom and the baby and Summer and the 2 geldings are on it every single day.